Don't ignore this psalm, not because it is loud, not because it demands attention, but because it waits quietly for those who are already too tired to keep searching. If you're listening to this with a heavy chest, with thoughts that refuse to slow down, with a soul that feels stretched thin by days that never truly end, this psalm is for the exhausted soul. Some exhaustion cannot be explained with words. It is not just physical tiredness. It is the kind that settles behind the eyes, the kind that makes silence feel loud, the kind that makes even prayer feel like effort. You wake up tired, you go to sleep tired, and somewhere between obligations, expectations, and unanswered questions, your inner strength feels quietly drained. Many people carry this exhaustion without ever naming it. They function, they respond, they smile when necessary, but inside, something feels depleted. This psalm is not written for those who feel strong. It was written for the soul that has reached the end of its own resources, for the heart that no longer wants noise, advice, or explanations, only rest. There is a reason Psalm 62 does not begin with urgency. It begins with stillness. True rest does not shout. It does not rush. It does not compete for attention. The exhausted soul does not need motivation. It needs permission to stop striving. Modern life rarely allows that. You are told to push harder, to stay productive, to keep moving forward, even when your inner world is asking for pause. But this psalm speaks to a different rhythm, a slower one, a quieter one. It does not deny the pressure. It does not pretend the fear is imaginary. It simply redirects where the weight is placed. Because exhaustion often comes from carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. Expectations, outcomes, the future, other people's approval, your own unanswered prayers. Over time, the soul grows tired not because it is weak, but because it has been holding too much for too long. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has tried to fix everything internally, for the heart that has replayed the same worries late at night, for the mind that feels overstimulated yet empty at the same time. Psalm 62 introduces a radical idea for the weary heart. That rest does not come from escape, but from alignment, from placing the weight of your inner life somewhere stable, not in circumstances, not in outcomes, not in your own emotional strength, but in God alone. This is why the psalm repeats itself, because exhausted souls forget easily, and repetition is not weakness, it is care. The psalm does not say your problems will disappear. It does not promise instant relief. It promises something deeper, stillness, a stillness that exists even when life remains loud, a rest that does not depend on conditions. If your soul feels exhausted, this psalm is not asking you to feel better. It is inviting you to stop forcing yourself to feel anything at all, just to listen, just to breathe, just to allow the words to carry what you no longer can. In a world that rewards constant effort, Psalm 62 offers something rare, permission to be still without guilt. It speaks directly to the exhausted soul that feels unseen, the one that has been strong for too long, the one that has quietly endured. This psalm is not about doing more for God. It is about resting in Him. And that is why it begins not with action, but with silence. Because silence is where exhausted souls finally exhale. And as you listen, you are not required to respond. You are not required to understand everything. You are not required to fix anything tonight. Let the words arrive slowly. Let them settle without resistance. This psalm is for the exhausted soul, and it does not rush you. Exhaustion does not always come from doing too much. Sometimes it comes from caring too deeply for too long, from holding unanswered questions in silence, from waiting, from hoping, from trying to trust while feeling uncertain. The exhausted soul is not lazy. It is often the most faithful one, the one that keeps showing up even when strength feels gone. Many people mistake exhaustion for lack of faith, but Scripture never does. Psalm 62 speaks to those who believe and are tired anyway, because belief does not cancel fatigue, and trust does not mean you never feel overwhelmed. The soul grows exhausted when it has been vigilant for too long, watching, anticipating, preparing for what might go wrong. Even rest becomes difficult when the mind refuses to stand down. You lie down, but you do not rest. You close your eyes, but thoughts remain awake. Your body pauses, but your inner world keeps moving. This is the exhaustion Psalm 62 addresses. Not surface tiredness, but deep internal weariness. The kind that whispers, "I can't keep carrying this." And yet, you keep carrying it anyway. The modern world celebrates self-reliance. Be strong. Be independent. Handle it yourself. But the exhausted soul has reached a quiet realization. Self-reliance has limits, and Psalm 62 does not shame that realization. It honors it. It acknowledges that true rest begins where self-effort ends. This is why the psalm repeats one simple truth again and again, because tired minds need simplicity, not complexity. My soul finds rest in God alone, not partially, not occasionally, alone. The exhausted soul does not need 10 instructions. It needs one stable place to lean. Psalm 62 gently removes alternatives. It does not argue. It does not debate. It simply returns the soul to one anchor. God alone, not success, not control, not answers, not timing, just God. This repetition is not poetic filler. It is spiritual grounding. When the soul is exhausted, clarity matters more than explanation. You do not need to understand why you are tired. You do not need to justify it. You only need a place where the weight can be set down. Psalm 62 offers that place. It recognizes how fragile human stability can be, how quickly confidence can shake, how easily peace can slip away. And instead of demanding stronger faith, it offers deeper rest. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that feels emotionally overloaded, for the one who feels responsible for outcomes they cannot control, for the heart that keeps scanning the future, searching for safety. The psalm interrupts that scanning. It invites the soul to stop watching the horizon and look inward, not to analyze, not to judge, but to be still. Stillness is not an activity. It is trust expressed without words. Psalm 62 teaches that stillness is an act of surrender, not weakness. And surrender is not giving up. It is giving over, giving the weight of expectations back to the one who can hold them. This is why the psalm does not rush into promises. It slows the reader down first, because exhausted souls cannot receive hope while running. They must first stop, and Psalm 62 understands this. It waits for your breathing to settle, for your thoughts to loosen their grip, for your inner resistance to soften. This psalm is not meant to be consumed quickly. It is meant to be inhabited, line by line, breath by breath. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has forgotten what rest feels like, for the one who has normalized pressure, for the one who has learned to survive but not to be still. As you continue listening, Nothing is required of you. No performance. No emotional response. Only presence. Let the psalm do what was written to do. Carry what you no longer can. My soul finds rest in God alone. From him comes my salvation. These words are not rushed. They are not spoken loudly. They are whispered from experience. The psalm does not say the soul will find rest. It says it does. Not someday. Not after everything is resolved. But now. This matters deeply for the exhausted soul. Because exhaustion often convinces you that rest is conditional. That peace must wait. That calm will come later. But Psalm 62 places rest before resolution. My soul finds rest in God alone. The soul, not the schedule, not the circumstances, not the emotions. The soul, the deepest part of you, the part that feels tired even when everything looks fine on the surface. This is why this psalm is for the exhausted soul. It speaks beneath the noise. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. Notice what is not said. It does not say the world will stop shaking. It says you will not. Exhaustion often comes from trying to control instability, from bracing yourself against every possible impact. Psalm 62 releases you from that posture. A fortress does not chase threats. It stands. A rock does not adjust itself to storms. It remains. This psalm quietly shifts the soul from defense to rest. How long will you assault me? All of you throw me down, this leaning wall, this tottering fence. The psalm acknowledges pressure, opposition, instability. It does not deny that the soul feels under attack. Exhausted souls often feel like leaning walls, still standing but barely, functional but fragile. And yet, the psalm does not panic about this condition. It names it and then redirects. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. This repetition is intentional because tired minds wander back to worry easily. The psalm speaks to itself, and so can you. When the inner world feels chaotic, truth must be repeated gently. My hope comes from him, not from progress, not from reassurance, not from control. From him. The exhausted soul often confuses hope with relief, but this psalm offers something steadier. Hope that does not fluctuate with energy levels. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. Again, the words return, because repetition calms the nervous system of the soul. Psalm 62 is not meant to be read once. It is meant to be breathed. Each repetition sinks deeper. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. This is where the psalm opens space, not for strength, but for honesty. Exhausted souls do not need to be composed. They need somewhere safe to pour. Pouring out is not complaining. It is releasing pressure. Psalm 62 gives permission to unload, not selectively, not politely, fully, because God is not overwhelmed by the weight you carry. Exhaustion grows when emotions are stored instead of released. This psalm interrupts that cycle. It says, bring it out, all of it, fear, confusion, disappointment, silence. God is not fragile, and neither is your refuge. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has held everything in, the one that has been careful, measured, reserved, Psalm 62 invites a different posture. Rest does not require explanation, only trust. As these words settle, you are not asked to fix your faith, only to let it rest. Because this psalm was never about effort. It was about where the soul leans. And for the exhausted soul, leaning is exhaustion often comes from resisting reality. Not because reality is unbearable, but because the soul keeps fighting alone. Psalm 62 does not ask you to deny what feels heavy. It asks you to stop carrying it in isolation. When my heart is overwhelmed. The Bible never treats overwhelm as failure. It treats it as a signal that the soul needs refuge. In modern life, refuge is often confused with distraction, scrolling, noise, constant input. But distraction does not rest the soul. It only delays the moment when silence returns. Psalm 62 offers a refuge that works with silence, not against it. It teaches the exhausted soul to remain still without being empty. This matters deeply today because many people are not physically exhausted. They are emotionally overextended. They respond to messages they are too tired to answer. They make decisions while mentally drained. They carry responsibility long after their strength has expired. And slowly, rest becomes something postponed, something earned, something always coming later. Psalm 62 gently dismantles that idea. It does not say, rest after everything is done. It says, rest in God alone, right here, right now. This psalm is the exhausted soul that keeps waiting for permission to stop. It gives that permission freely, not by removing responsibility, but by relocating trust. Trust no longer sits in your ability to hold everything together. It rests in God's ability to hold you. This shift changes how the soul breathes. Instead of bracing, it softens. Instead of scanning for danger, it leans. The psalm says, power belongs to God. That sentence is deeply practical. It releases the soul from pretending it is in control. Exhaustion grows when responsibility exceeds capacity, and Psalm 62 restores balance. It reminds a tired heart that ultimate power was never assigned to you. You were never meant to carry outcomes. Only obedience, only presence, only trust. This is why the psalm speaks so calmly. It is not trying to convince you of something new. It is returning you to something forgotten, that God is stable, even when you are not. This psalm is the exhausted soul that feels pressure performed spiritually, to pray correctly, to feel correctly, to believe strongly at all times. Psalm 62 removes performance from the equation. It does not praise intensity. It praises stillness. Stillness that says, I am safe enough to stop striving. In a world that rewards urgency, this is countercultural, but it is healing. The psalm also speaks about human instability, how people are like a breath, like a fleeting moment. This is not meant to discourage. It is meant to humble. Because exhaustion often comes from expecting permanence from what is temporary. Approval fades, success shifts, control slips, but God remains. And Psalm 62 anchors the soul there, not emotionally, existentially. This is why this psalm is for the exhausted soul. It does not energize you to keep running. It invites you to stop running altogether, to stand still, to breathe, to release the illusion of control. And as you listen, nothing dramatic needs to happen. Rest is subtle. It feels like weight leaving the chest, like thoughts slowing, like permission returning. If you feel even a small moment of calm, do not rush past it. That is the psalm doing its work. This psalm is not meant to excite you. It is meant to settle you. And in that settling, something quiet begins to heal. Exhausted souls often fear stillness, not because it is empty, but because it reveals how tired they truly are. When everything slows down, the body finally speaks. The heart finally admits what it has been carrying, and the soul realizes how long it has been surviving instead of resting. Psalm 62 does not rush you through that realization. It stays with you inside it. My soul, find rest in God alone. Notice the tenderness of that sentence. It is not a command shouted from above. It is a reminder spoken inward. The psalmist speaks to his own soul because exhaustion distorts perspective, and sometimes the soul needs to hear truth repeated gently, again and again. This repetition is not accidental. It creates safety. The exhausted soul does not need new information. It needs familiar truth spoken slowly. Psalm 62 circles back, not to confuse, but to calm, like waves that keep returning to shore. Predictable, steady, unthreatening. This is why repetition heals. When the nervous system has been overstimulated, consistency restores trust. The psalm repeats that God is a rock, a fortress, a refuge, because exhausted souls need stability more than inspiration. You may not feel strong right now. You may not feel hopeful. You may not even feel peaceful. But Psalm 62 does not depend on how you feel. It depends on who God is. This is where rest deepens. When peace is no longer something you generate, but something you receive. The psalm also speaks of waiting quietly before God. Waiting is difficult for exhausted souls because waiting feels unproductive, and exhaustion often comes from living too long under productivity pressure. Psalm 62 reframes waiting. Waiting is not wasting time. It is releasing control. It is choosing trust over urgency. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that feels guilty for resting, for the one who equates stillness with failure. Psalm 62 breaks that lie gently. It shows that stillness is an expression of faith, because only someone who trusts can truly be still. The psalm also warns against placing hope in temporary things. Wealth, status, power, not to shame, but to protect. Exhaustion often comes from building emotional security on unstable foundations, and Psalm 62 quietly removes them one by one, not aggressively, not harshly, just truthfully, so the soul can rest somewhere solid. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has been disappointed, that expected relief by now, that prayed for change and is still waiting. Psalm 62 does not rush the answer. It steadies the waiting. It teaches the soul how to remain anchored while life remains unresolved. This is deep rest, not the kind that removes questions, but the kind that makes them lighter to carry. As you listen, the repetition is intentional. It is not meant to end quickly. It is meant to linger. So the soul learns that safety is not temporary. It can stay. If your breathing has slowed even slightly, that matters. If your thoughts feel less sharp, that matters. These are signs of rest returning. This psalm is not dramatic. It is dependable. And dependability is exactly what exhausted souls need. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are resting. And Psalm 62 honors that. Exhaustion often convinces the soul that rest must be temporary, that calm is fragile, that peace will disappear as soon as life speaks again. Psalm 62 gently corrects that fear. It does not describe rest as a moment. It describes rest as a position. My soul waits in silence for God alone. Silence here is not emptiness. It is settledness. The psalm does not say the world becomes quiet. It says the soul does. This distinction matters because life will continue to move. Responsibilities will return. Noise will reappear. But Psalm 62 teaches the exhausted soul how to remain internally still even when externally busy. This is not denial. It is alignment. The soul learns where to anchor, so it does not drift with every demand. Exhaustion grows when the soul has no anchor, and Psalm 62 provides one. It repeats that God is unshakable. That power belongs to Him. That love is steadfast. These are not abstract concepts. They are stabilizers. For the exhausted soul, stability is healing. When the inner world feels unpredictable, something constant restores balance. Psalm 62 also addresses fear of vulnerability. Pour out your hearts to Him. Pouring out requires trust. It means releasing control over how you are perceived. Exhausted souls often hide, not because they are dishonest, but because they are too tired to explain. This psalm creates a space where explanation is unnecessary. God already knows the weight. The psalm reassures the soul that honesty does not threaten safety, that expressing weakness does not reduce worth. This is deeply restful, because exhaustion is often tied to emotional containment. Holding emotions back consumes energy. Psalm 62 releases that pressure. It allows the soul to exist without performance. Another subtle theme of the psalm is patience. Not passive waiting, but steady trust. The exhausted soul often wants immediate relief, and understandably so. But Psalm 62 offers something more sustainable. A calm that does not collapse when answers delay. This calm grows quietly, not through effort, through trust repeated. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that fears losing control if it rests. Psalm 62 shows that rest does not weaken discernment. It sharpens it, because clarity returns when the mind is no longer overwhelmed. Stillness creates space for wisdom. This is why the psalm does not pressure you to decide anything. It invites you to rest first. Decisions made from rest are different. They are slower, more grounded, less reactive. The exhausted soul often lives in reaction mode. Psalm 62 interrupts that cycle. It slows time internally, so the soul can respond instead of react. As this psalm continues to repeat its truths, something subtle happens. Trust moves from concept to posture. The soul stops leaning on itself and leans somewhere safer. This is the deep work of Psalm 62, not emotional intensity, but emotional stabilization. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has been carrying invisible weight, and as you listen, you are not expected to feel transformed. Rest does not announce itself. It settles. If your mind feels quieter, even briefly, that is enough. If your body feels less tense, that is enough. Psalm 62 does not demand results. It offers refuge, and refuge does not expire. Exhaustion changes how the soul experiences time. Moments feel heavier. Waiting feels longer. The future feels closer and more demanding. Psalm 62 speaks into this altered sense of time. It reminds the soul that rest is not something to be rushed. It is something to remain in. My soul waits quietly for God. Waiting quietly does not mean waiting anxiously. It means waiting without inner resistance. The exhausted soul often waits with tension, scanning, anticipating, preparing for disappointment. Psalm 62 teaches a different kind of waiting, a waiting that trusts the ground beneath its feet. This kind of waiting conserves energy. It does not drain it, because it is rooted in confidence, not fear. The psalm also acknowledges that pressure does not disappear simply because faith is present. There are still voices, still expectations, still instability around you. But Psalm 62 shifts the center. It does not tell the soul to fight the noise. It teaches the soul to outgrow it. When the soul is anchored, noise loses its authority. This is a quiet strength, not loud, not forceful, but resilient. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that feels worn down by repetition. The same problems, the same worries, the same unresolved tension. Psalm 62 does not promise novelty. It promises consistency. And consistency is what tired hearts need. The psalm contrasts human instability with divine steadiness. People change, circumstances shift, promises break, but God remains. This truth does not energize the soul. It steadies it, and steadiness restores strength slowly. This is why the psalm warns against placing hope in what can be taken away, not to instill fear, but to protect peace. The exhausted soul has learned the cost of misplaced trust. Psalm 62 gently redirects trust without condemnation. It does not say, "You trusted wrongly." It says, "There's a safer place." This safety is not emotional numbness. It is emotional security. Security that allows the soul to breathe without bracing. As you listen, notice how the psalm does not change tone. It remains calm, measured, stable, because calm repetition is grounding. It tells the nervous system, you are safe enough to rest. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that fears a return of stress. Psalm 62 reassures that rest does not depend on circumstances staying perfect. It depends on where the soul stays anchored. Even when demands return, the anchor remains. Even when decisions must be made, the anchor remains. Even when answers are delayed, the anchor remains. This is sustainable rest, not fragile calm. The psalm also speaks of justice belonging to God. This matters deeply for exhausted souls, because exhaustion often comes from trying to right every wrong internally. Carrying unresolved injustice is heavy. Psalm 62 releases that weight. It reminds the soul that not every imbalance needs to be corrected by you. Some things are meant to be entrusted. This is not passivity. It is wisdom. The soul conserves energy by releasing what is not its responsibility. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has been over-responsible, that has carried emotional burdens meant for God alone. Psalm 62 quietly restores proper weight distribution, so the soul can stand without strain. As this psalm continues to speak, you may notice a subtle shift, not excitement, not emotional release, but steadiness. This is how deep rest feels. Unremarkable, stable, lasting, This psalm does not rush you forward. It invites you to remain, because the exhausted soul heals not by moving faster, but by staying anchored longer. Exhausted souls often fear regression, the fear that calm will fade, that old anxiety will return, that rest will not last. Psalm 62 anticipates this fear. It does not promise a life without pressure. It promises a soul that remains grounded within it. This distinction protects the exhausted soul from disappointment, because peace that depends on circumstances is fragile, but peace that depends on God alone is resilient. The psalm repeats where stability comes from, not from outcomes, not from control, but from trust. My soul finds rest in God alone. The repetition is not poetic excess. It is reinforcement. Exhausted minds forget quickly. They return to self-protection, to overthinking, to control. Psalm 62 gently calls the soul back again, not with urgency, with patience. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that feels disappointed by its own limits, that thought it should be stronger by now, that expected to be past this stage. Psalm 62 removes comparison from the equation. It does not measure progress. It offers presence. Rest is not a reward for improvement. It is a refuge for the weary. The psalm also confronts the illusion of self-sufficiency. It speaks clearly about human frailty, not to discourage, but to relieve. Because exhaustion often comes from pretending to be stronger than you are. Psalm 62 allows the soul to admit limitation without shame. Admitting limitation is not failure. It is honesty, and honesty restores alignment. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has been functioning beyond capacity, that has adapted to pressure instead of healing from it. Psalm 62 gently interrupts that pattern. It reminds the soul that adaptation is not the same as rest. Survival is not the same as peace. The psalm also speaks of God's steadfast love, love that does not fluctuate with performance, love that does not withdraw during weakness. This matters deeply for exhausted souls, because exhaustion often carries self-criticism. I should be better. I should handle this. I should not feel this way. Psalm 62 dismantles that inner voice. It does not argue with it. It replaces it with truth. That love belongs to God. That power belongs to God. That rest is found in God. This simplicity is intentional. Complexity overwhelms tired minds. Psalm 62 reduces everything to essentials. One anchor, one refuge, one source. As you listen, the psalm continues to do quiet work. It is not dramatic. It is steady. If you notice your thoughts wandering, that is normal. Exhausted minds drift. The psalm does not punish that. It simply welcomes you back. Again and again. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that needs consistency more than inspiration. And Psalm 62 offers exactly that. Not a surge of emotion, but a stable place to stand. As this block ends, there is nothing to conclude. Rest does not conclude. It continues. Remain here as long as you need. There's a point where the exhausted soul stops asking for relief and begins asking for stability. Not a break from life, but a place within life that does not collapse. Psalm 62 answers that request quietly. It does not offer escape. It offers grounding. My soul finds rest in God alone. At this stage, the words feel less like instruction and more like recognition, as if the psalm is naming something your soul already knows, but has not had the strength to articulate. Exhaustion often strips language away. You feel much, but explain little. Psalm 62 becomes language for the weary heart. It speaks when the soul is too tired to form sentences. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that no longer wants emotional highs, no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden shifts, just something that lasts. The psalm delivers that by returning again to permanence. God is not described as a momentary comfort. He is described as a rock. Rocks do not adapt to storms. Storms adapt around rocks. This imagery matters for exhausted souls because exhaustion comes from constant adjustment, adapting, flexing, absorbing impact. Psalm 62 releases the soul from that role. It says, "You do not need to absorb everything. Some things are meant to break against God, not you." The psalm also acknowledges social pressure, voices that manipulate, expectations that drain, systems that demand more than they give. It does not deny these realities, but it removes their authority over the soul. Trust in Him at all times, not because life is easy, but because God remains steady regardless. This trust is not blind optimism. It is informed surrender. The exhausted soul learns when to stop negotiating with fear, when to stop rehearsing outcomes, when to stop carrying hypothetical futures. Psalm 62 gently closes those mental loops. It brings the soul back to now, to presence, to breath, to stillness. This is where strength quietly regenerates, not through stimulation, through rest. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that feels emotionally flat, not sad, not anxious, just depleted. Psalm 62 does not demand emotional response. It offers permission to be neutral, to exist without pressure. That neutrality is healing because it allows the soul to recalibrate. The psalm also speaks of justice belonging to God. For exhausted souls, this is relief. It means you do not need to internally correct every wrong. You do not need to replay every conversation. You do not need to defend yourself endlessly in your thoughts. Psalm 62 releases that burden. Justice is not yours to maintain. Peace returns when responsibility is returned to its proper place. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has been emotionally vigilant, always watching, always alert, always prepared. Psalm 62 lowers the internal guard, not because danger disappears, but because protection is entrusted. This is not weakness. It is alignment. As you continue listening, the psalm no longer feels like something you are learning. It feels like somewhere you are staying. And staying is the goal. Rest is not a pause between efforts. It is a foundation beneath them. Psalm 62 builds that foundation slowly, without urgency, without pressure, so the exhausted soul can remain. At this point, the exhausted soul is no longer searching. It is settling, not because everything has been resolved, but because something has been recentered. Psalm 62 has done its quiet work. It has shifted the soul from effort to trust, from urgency to stillness, from self-reliance to refuge. This is where rest becomes practice, not something you feel once, but something you return to. My soul finds rest in God alone. These words now function like an internal compass. When pressure rises, they guide you back. When thoughts scatter, they gather you. When exhaustion whispers, they respond. This psalm is for the exhausted soul learning to live from rest, not toward it. This changes how you move through ordinary moments. Tasks feel lighter, not because they disappear, but because they no longer carry emotional weight. Psalm 62 teaches a soul to separate effort from identity. You can act without striving. You can decide without anxiety. You can engage without depletion, because your worth is no longer tied to performance. This is deeply practical. Exhaustion often comes from living as if everything matters equally. Psalm 62 introduces hierarchy. God matters most. Everything else is secondary. This ordering restores energy. When the soul knows where to place ultimate trust, it stops over-investing in temporary things. The psalm also reinforces humility, not humiliation, but freedom from needing to prove strength. The exhausted soul often hides fatigue behind competence. Psalm 62 removes that mask. It shows that dependence is not weakness. It is wisdom. The psalm continues to repeat itself because daily life will challenge this posture. Stress will return. Noise will return. Expectations will return. But repetition creates resilience. Each return to stillness strengthens the habit of rest. This psalm is the exhausted soul building a new rhythm, one that does not collapse under pressure. The psalm also teaches the soul to wait differently, waiting without panic, without rumination, without self-blame. Waiting becomes spacious instead of suffocating, because the soul is no longer alone in it. This changes how time feels. Moments stop rushing. Days stop overwhelming. Life regains proportion. As you integrate this psalm into daily awareness, something subtle shifts. You stop asking, "When will this end?" and start trusting, "I am held while it continues." This is sustainable peace, not dramatic, not fragile, but steady. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that is learning how to return to stillness again and again, not perfectly, but faithfully. And faithfulness does not require intensity, only presence. As this block closes, notice the absence of urgency. Nothing needs to happen next. You are already where you need to be. There's a quiet confidence that grows when the soul no longer resists rest. Not confidence in outcomes, not confidence in strength, but confidence in being held. Psalm 62 cultivates this confidence slowly. It does not rush the soul toward conclusions. It allows trust to mature without pressure. At this stage, exhaustion no longer dominates the inner landscape. It is still present, but it no longer defines. The soul has found somewhere to stand. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has learned to stop measuring itself, no longer asking, "Am I doing enough? Am I believing enough? Am I handling this well?" Psalm 62 dissolves those questions, because rest does not require evaluation. It requires surrender. My soul waits quietly for God alone. Quiet waiting is not passive resignation. It is settled trust. It is choosing not to chase reassurance. The exhausted soul often seeks confirmation, signs, affirmations, immediate clarity. Psalm 62 offers something deeper, certainty without proof, not because questions disappear, but because they lose urgency. This psalm is the exhausted soul that has lived too long in anticipation mode, always preparing, always bracing. Psalm 62 releases that posture. It teaches the soul that vigilance is not the same as faith. Faith rests. The psalm also reminds us that power and love belong to God. This pairing is intentional. Power without love would be frightening. Love without power would be insufficient. But together, they create safety, and safety restores exhausted souls. When the soul knows it is loved and protected, it stops scanning for threats. This is why calm deepens here. Not because life becomes predictable, but because God becomes central. The psalm does not end with fireworks. It ends with assurance, a quiet knowing. This is a kind of ending exhausted souls need, not stimulation, but closure without pressure. As you sit with these words, you may notice something important. Your thoughts no longer demand resolution. Your emotions no longer need explanation. You are simply present. This presence is not emptiness. It is fullness without noise. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that needs permission to remain here, not to move on quickly, not to rush back into effort, but to stay anchored. The psalm does not call you forward. It holds you still, and stillness is where healing consolidates. If you listen to this psalm again tomorrow, or next week, or in another season of exhaustion, it will meet you the same way. Steady, patient, unchanged, because refuge does not depend on timing. It remains. An exhausted soul learns something crucial here. Rest is not something you lose easily. It is something you return to again and again. This psalm is for the exhausted soul, and it will still be here when you need it. There is no sudden ending here, because rest does not end. It continues quietly, long after the words fade. Psalm 62 was never meant to be consumed once and forgotten. It was meant to become a place the soul returns to, especially when exhaustion returns. And it will. Life does not promise lighter days, but this psalm promises a steady refuge. My soul finds rest in God alone. These words now linger, not as sound, but as posture, a way of being. The exhausted soul no longer needs to force calm. It recognizes it, not as something fragile, but as something grounded. This psalm is the exhausted soul that has learned a new rhythm, a rhythm that does not accelerate with pressure, that does not collapse under demand, a rhythm that remains. You may still feel tired tomorrow. You may still face uncertainty. You may still carry questions without answers. Psalm 62 never promised otherwise. What it promised was this: that you do not carry those things alone. That rest is not postponed. It is available. That silence before God is not absence. It is safety. As this psalm settles, notice how nothing is being asked of you. No response, no declaration, no effort, only awareness. This is intentional, because exhausted souls heal best without obligation. This psalm is for the exhausted soul that has lived too long under expectation. It replaces expectation with presence. It replaces striving with trust. And trust changes everything quietly. If you return to this psalm again, it will not demand progress. It will offer refuge. Again, if you listen when your heart feels heavy, it will not judge the weight. It will hold it. Again, if you listen when your mind feels crowded, it will not compete with the noise. It will remain still. Again, this is the gift of Psalm 62. Not answers, but rest. And rest does not need to be explained. It only needs to be received. Before this moment ends, allow yourself one gentle breath, not to reset, not to prepare, just to acknowledge that you are here, still, held. If this psalm spoke to your exhaustion, if it gave language to something you could not explain, you can leave a quiet word below. You don't need to share details. Even a single word is enough. rest, still, here. Sometimes naming the moment helps the soul remember it later. This psalm is for the exhausted soul, and you are welcome to return whenever you need rest again. The refuge remains, silently, faithfully, always